Give it up for yourselves. One more time. I had no idea. We were so set affiliated over here. And I'm from New York. What's New York at? We get a bad rap. We're just very busy and always multitasking. But we're wonderful people. We have amazing women on the panel today. We have been listening to tremendous information. What I love about today is we've been learning about our history. And prior to today, we almost thought we didn't have one, right? We almost thought that information was not accessible to us. But we're grateful for this team, grateful for this staff, putting together amazing people, learning about our history all day. Dr. Deborah Crockett, Dr. Celeste Malone, and we're also going to hear from tremendous legends in the field who have worked tremendously in colleges across the country. Give it up one more time for these amazing people. We're going to start with some brief introductions. We're going to start with Dr. Antoinette Miranda first. Give it up as she introduces herself. Your school?
Oh, okay. So, yes, so I'm a professor of school psychology at the Ohio State University. And I'm also chair of the Department of Teaching and Learning. This is my 35th year there.
Wow.
Yes, I worked in New York City Public Schools in Bronxville
Are you
for 3
okay?
years. Yes, I am. It was a great training ground, and I also worked in Ohio and Kentucky as a school psychologist.
Give it up one more time for Dr. Miranda. Mrs. Dr. Janine Jones, please, you're next.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. This is just so cool. So, I am Janine Jones. I am a professor of school psychology at the University of Washington in Seattle. And I am there by way of being educated at University of Texas. And when I was at University of Texas, I happened to meet my road dog, my life partner, my husband of now 21 years, who happens to also be here, Dr. Brent Jones.
Shout out to him.
And this guy is so dope, I just have to say. He is the superintendent of Seattle Public Schools.
Oh,
And last but not least, New York's own Dr. Sherrie Proctor.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Sherrie Proctor. I am a professor of school psychology at Queens College, City University of New York. I have been a school psychologist in Atlanta Public Schools, as well as Philadelphia Public Schools. And also I received my doctorate from Georgia State School Psychology. And I have to say, I'm so honored to be on this stage. Antoinette Miranda and Janine Jones are women, Black women I have looked up to. And this experience is just incredible. Thank you all for everything that you have done, paving the way for people like you.
Thank you all for your incredible work, the history, the experience that you brought to this. I want to know, first question, how do you feel the field of school psychology has evolved over the years that you guys have worked and impacted the field? Any one of you can start first and we'll go from there. How do you feel that's been impacted with your work?
Well, I can tell a story that kind of exemplifies the way things were. So I was on the publications board for NASC in 2007, and I had proposed a book that some of you may have read called The Psychology of Multiculturalism in the Schools. And at the time, I had to step out for the group to decide whether they were going to accept the book proposal. And when I came back in, they told me that they were going to have to deny the proposal or decline. And what it was over concern about one of the chapter titles. And the chapter title was written by Dr. Antoinette Miranda. And it was white privilege. And so I proceeded to go ahead and push and talk about, well, don't you know the work of Peggy McIntosh? And don't you know? And I started talking about work from the 80s, and I basically shamed everybody in the room until we got to the point where they really honestly thought that there would be no sales of the book because of that in particular. So now where we are is we changed it to privilege, we took out the white, and then the book did extremely well, and now we're at a place where we can actually say the words privilege, we can talk about implicit bias and microaggressions, and nobody runs. So that's good.
Tremendous work.
I can
Please.
tell you I remember that. I remember Janine calling me. I was so hot. And so she's like, no, we're gonna have it in there, it's gonna be okay. So we did end up changing it to accommodate more than white privilege so that the book would get published.
Tremendously difficult work, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and I have to say, you know, I just finished editing the 7th edition of Best Practices in School Psychology. And I will tell you that one of the themes in this edition is social justice, and we are discussing things like white privilege and racial microaggressions and oppression. And so I think, you know, Dr. Jones' memory of how challenging it was to have those kinds of discussions in school psychology, just knowing that Best Practice 7th edition is featuring and centering those types of topics tells you and gives you a peek into how far we've come in this field.
Dr. Proctor, much of your research was focused on recruitment and retention. So in your opinion, what needs do you think the field, what meaningful change do you think needs to happen for Black school psychologists in the field?
For Black school psychologists, I think at the graduate program level, I think, you know, this morning I said, you know, I was sharing with some colleagues, I said, I'm not gonna cry, I'm not gonna cry. But I was sitting there listening to Dr. Mellon and Dr. Proctor speak, and tears started welling up in my eyes because I remember when you would come to a NAS and there may have been 20 Black school psychologists, and we all knew each other. We all met up at Minority Scholarship Reception, that was where we met. And so it's kind of overwhelming, it's beautiful. But it is overwhelming to see a room full of Black school psychologists. And so I think we've made progress with recruitment. We still have a lot of work to do in terms of recruitment, but I think one of the things we need to think about is retention and inclusion. Because just from my own research, one of the things that I know is that once Black students are in school psych programs, it's not easy for us in school psych programs. It's the fact that any Black person makes it out of a school psychology program, often I think is a miracle, and that's sad. And so I think the work we have to do at the field level as well as at the program level is one of inclusion. One where we feel like we don't have to fight for our right to be here, because we deserve to be here. And not only do we deserve to be here, our field's not viable without us here. I think that's the main thing that we need to move towards in terms. And then, let me just say this, because I want to say this, I need to get this out. I write about Black people in school psychology, and I have done that since my doctoral dissertation. But one of the things I think that has become clearer and clearer to me is that we talk about racism in school psychology. Racism can look differently for different groups. I think we have to talk about anti-Black racism.
Clap it up for that, please.
Because it hits differently, right? And so I think until we start really having real conversations of what it is in school psych to experience anti-Black racism, we're not really getting to the crux of that experience for Black students in particular. So I think those are things that we need to do to move the field for Black people.
Dr. Jones, what do you think we need to do to provide more culturally responsive interventions for Black students?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I feel really strongly about this now that the way our assessment practices are taught and the way that we kind of learn what's the best gold standard of our work, we miss the fact that if we let it, assessment is a push-out practice. It's sending our kids out of school, or it's sending them into special education with no exit strategy. There's nobody held accountable for creating an approach for temporary care, support, and building someone up into a place where they can be successful without all of the supports. We don't even think about it. We just do what we're told to do. So when it comes to assessment as well as intervention, when we're doing interventions, if you've heard me talk, you always will hear me talk about things like stereotype threat and microaggressions and the ways in which they impact your ability to succeed and cope with the stressors of our external environments. And so if you are doing any form of intervention and you don't address those, especially with Black youth, you're gonna miss something. You're not gonna be able to fully connect with their experience. So we heard in some of the talks earlier about how these affect learning, but then also what are the things that help Black youth succeed, and that's things like racial socialization and being able to have a strong racial identity and ability to see themselves in their environment. So when I'm talking about intervention, I'm always including these constructs as part of the work and as part of the evidence base that a lot of folks don't talk about.
Tremendous. And Dr. Miranda, apparently the Ohio State is the Wakanda of graduate programs. And it's all because of you. What have you done? What has been the impact on students and the work that you've done?
So first I want to know if I can be the Queen Mother now.
No time, no time.
So we have all of our Black students here except for two. OH. One of the things that I have to go back a little bit, I graduated from the University of Cincinnati. Yeah. And I really have to give credit to that program for allowing me to, and my advisor, Dr. David Barnett, who allowed me to research diversity. At the time, I didn't realize that was something that advisors didn't do until I went out and talked to people. The experience that probably had the most impact on me was working in District 23, Brownsville in New York City.
Wow.
Yes. My husband's from Brooklyn. Like your husband, I met my husband at UC.
No, that district is not a game.
It is. So, so I went to Brooklyn because I thought maybe it would be easier to get used to a big city than a small town, but I did getting back to Columbus, Ohio, which is where I grew up, so it all comes around. But it was in that experience where I came away wanting to be able to train students to work with culturally different populations, because I saw what happened to Black kids and Latino kids when the teachers and school psychologists didn't understand those kids from their culture. So when I came to Ohio State, they asked me to develop a diversity course, so that was my first opportunity. You have to realize this was 1988. It was also a time when they were starting to have diversity. And in 2000, I had the opportunity, there was only two of us, two faculty members. And I convinced that other faculty member, it didn't take too much convincing actually, that we should have a program that was focused on urban and social justice. And I chose that instead of diversity because San Diego State was already doing a pretty good job around diversity. And it was because I wanted OSU to have an identity. And I saw that a lot of school psych programs around the country had an identity around something, and Ohio State didn't. We were big. We were kind of known as traditional assessors because of the previous faculty member that was there. And so we did. We took a leap of faith, And it was really interesting to me because a lot of people thought, why are you going to do that? You are not going to get students. Our first application pool doubled. It was 90 students that applied to the program, and miraculously, we had diversity in it.
Wow.
And so
Give it up for that, please.
Yeah.
Please, please, please.
So the work in social justice sort of attracted. I will say that was in 2000. It's been a long journey, so it did not happen overnight. And the reason why, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, we started to have a critical mass of Black and Latino students, mostly African American students. And we started to have students that we were actually turning away, which is very unusual. And then the other piece is that we started to you need to have African American or at least minority faculty. And one of the first ones that came after me was Dr. Keisha Ratliff. Yeah, give it up. Keisha's my ride or die because I always wanted to have collaboration. And it's something we've kind of talked about, that a lot of times you don't have people to collaborate with because you don't have enough of them across the country or you don't have them on your faculty. So she became a collaborator for me in writing about social justice. Then we got our next Black faculty was really kind of accidental. I had put him forth for a position that he didn't get, and then they put him up for a target hire. And we then got Dr. Scott Graves. And then finally, we got Dr. Kamante Heidelberg. And so it's sort of unusual now we're an R1 institution with 5 faculty, with 4 of them being African American. And yeah, so that really makes a difference. And we were very intentional in our program. We have an urban course, we have the diversity course, but we infuse diversity all throughout the program. Really try to go for fellowships, try to make sure we're able to fund them. And those are all the things that people recognize. If you're going to get students there, you have to be able to fund them. You have to be able to give them something that they want to, that they feel like is about them, and then have faculty who look like them. So it's been a wonderful ride. This is, like these ladies, I can tell you, I first met Janine at CDSPP, Council Director of School Psych Programs. And you guys are right, we would all see each other at Minority Affairs, and when I saw her, I was like, oh my God, there's another Black woman. And then she left academia for a minute, and I was like, where did she go? And then she came back at the University of Washington. And then I remember Sherrie when she was the first minority scholarship, and to watch her grow has been amazing. So I know, like Sherrie, I hope I don't cry, because I would never have imagined this. When I was involved in NAS, I was a graduate student, and in many respects I got involved because I was Black. It was Dr. Allen, I know I'm talking too much, but Dr. Allen Coulter, who wanted to know if there were internships that were geared towards minority populations. And Joe Zins, I'm sure because I was Black, said, hey, can you do this survey? And I did the survey and found out, and it's one of the articles, my maiden name was Hossell. So it's one of the articles cited the most because it was one of the first that looked at minority enrollment in school psychology programs around the country. And so it's true, we would go to NAS and we would see maybe 20 of us, and so we would all know each other. So to see this is absolutely amazing, and to see that I will leave my career, being able to see that this happened is very rewarding.
Absolutely. This is absolutely amazing to me because when I went to grad school, most of my teachers were white and older. I had one Black introduction teacher, and she just happens to be here. Dr. Henry is here. She saw me and she just gave me a hug. I'm like, well, oh, it's my one professor for my program. And I say that to say, so many of us have worked so hard in the field, trying to accomplish things, trying to move ahead, not knowing that there's been tremendous soldiers who have gone before us and have been doing tremendous work. Give it up for them just one more time. The million-dollar question that we want to know and school psychs want to know is, how did you not lose your mind? How did you manage your mental health, your patience, your fortitude while moving forward in this field. Please.
I'll start. I don't know if I have my mind at this point, but I'll start. I think community has been so important to my ability to stay in this field and to do the type of work that I would like to do. Like I said, at NASP every year, finding my people. I remember I have these times that I distinctly remember in my career. I remember Antoinette talking to me when I was a doctoral student one time in just a casual conversation and saying things that people had never told me, like, pay attention to who you work with, because when you get ready to go up for tenure, people who you've done so much collaboration with can't write letters of support for your tenure. Well, no one had ever told me that. And that was in a conversation, with Antoinette. I remember after I defended my dissertation, I had a poster session at NASP, and I just became Dr. Proctor, and I remember almost every Black academic in this field, which wasn't many at the time, was standing in front of my poster. And I remember the feeling I had. I was overwhelmed that my community had come to support me, to welcome me into academia. And so even to this day, the Black people in this field are my support system. And so, we look often, I think, to outside people for validation, but I never look to white school psychology for validation. So I think one of the things that's really important as a Black person in school psych is to know your community, to value your community. And the validation I get from my community is the validation that's important to me. And so if I could leave any message with young Black school psychologists, is to know why you're doing the work and who you're doing the work for. And if you never get validation from any other group outside of who you're doing this work for, it should be sustaining to you. And so that's been what sustained me. So thank you. And thank you all. It means a lot to know that. It just means the world to me, to know that you all support me in my work.
Everybody else, your self-care routines, how you've managed throughout the years of dealing with the vast level of politics as opposed to child development. I know you guys have a ton of stories about that. But how do we relate that to our students in terms of how we fortify ourselves when it comes to our goals and our vision?
One of the things that's always been important to me is mentoring students and mentoring others. And I actually told that story because there were so few of us that when it was time to get that external review letter and your work is about diversity, there's nobody out there in school psychology that can write you a letter. I have written so many of you people's letters. One year, I literally had 8 external review letters, and I said yes to every one of them because they were all minority and all writing in diversity.
Give it up for that.
Yeah. And for some people, I wrote their associate and full professor letter. But mentoring was really important. The other thing for me was outreach and engagement to the public schools, and particularly Columbus City schools. I did a lot of work, and so it was interesting because that work oftentimes is not valued at the university, but out in the schools it is so affirming. And so some of mine getting through was the work that I was able to do in the community and getting that feedback from them that I was actually making a difference in terms of helping teachers be able to do behavioral interventions or helping being able to implement MTSS. So I think those are things that got me through. So many of my students that I was able to mentor, and many of them were not my students in school psychology. So I just had a text from my first Black advisee who said that she thought her daughter wanted to go into school psychology. So That was really exciting. I've kept in touch with her all these years. So those are the things I think that kept me going, and the sense of community. Stacey Williams, I gotta give you a shout out. You know, I see her, there's so many, Sherrie, Janine, Aaron, so many, Celeste, my student Desiree, that every time I go to a conference and see them, it's like going back and seeing family that you haven't been with. I think those are the things that have kept me going, and believing that we can make a difference. But I love this morning talking about what our gift is, and I think we're all talking about that, thinking about what is our gift, and I think knowing that gift helps keep you going.
Tremendous, tremendous. I'm gonna be taking some questions from you guys. Think about them while we think about the last question. With all of your experience, with all of the hurdles that you've overcome over the years, where do you see the future of Black School Psychology going? Yes, that's exactly.
Okay, so when I heard that this was gonna happen the first time, I just started crying. And part of it was because of the hardship that we had to get here is so heavy. And then today, like turning around in the beginning and seeing this room so full with so much excitement, there is no way that Black School Psychology is going to fail. There's no way. We have a brighter future.
Future of Black Psychology.
You know, I ditto to Janine. I agree. It's just amazing to see that it took a long time, but sometimes it takes a while for those things to happen. But to see this, I can imagine what tonight's going to be like. But to see these beautiful faces, and I think really we often talk about being our authentic self, and I think that's what's really rewarding, that in this space we can be our authentic selves. So I think there's truly hope. I think that we'll continue to make a difference. And just seeing this, I agree with Janine, there's no way we can go back. So I think we have a bright future ahead of us.
Absolutely agree. This has been tremendous. Dr. Proctor.
I agree. I'm just overwhelmed. I'm so overwhelmed. Worked an entire career to see this, and it is overwhelming. I think that the future is so bright. It is so bright. It's so bright in the field for Black School Psychology. It's so bright in academia. It is just so bright. And today is just an example of how bright it is. And I don't think I realized until today how bright it is. But I'm really looking forward to the contributions that each person in this audience will make to our field, because we each bring something so special to the field. Our voices are so special and so needed in this field. And so I agree. I just think it's so bright. I'm so proud of Black School Psychology. I'm so proud.
And we can say as Black School Psychologists that we are tremendously proud to know you, all of you, while we're working in our separate districts and we're in our offices and we're wondering why has no one ever mentored us, or why have we never experienced this, why have we never had any level of clarity with these issues, knowing that the Black School Psychologists Network has put tremendous leaders in front of us, legends who have gone through this for years. I can't believe how many times I've sat in my office and I've said, I don't have anyone to talk to about this. But you guys are legends in the field. Would you give a round of applause for them? It even seems like 3 questions. Throw your hands up in the air. If you got some, one question right here. Come on. Don't be afraid now. Y'all was just set tripping and rocking there.
This is somewhat of a public service announcement. Those of you who I've not contacted, my name is Charles Bartholomew, Dr. Bartholomew. I'm a retired school psychologist and have actually worn many, many hats. I'm not necessarily going to ask a question, but give a commendation to all of you here who have participated in the research study that I did to complete my dissertation. When I completed it back in 1987, which was probably before many of you were born, I did not send a letter saying thank you, but I did want to tell you thank you for that. Another issue that I need to mention is that, as I mentioned earlier, I may have cornered you in the space during this particular conference to tell you, look, I wrote a book about the school prison pipeline. It's one of the first books, it is the first book that has been written by a school psychologist. And it's about what we do, or what we should be doing, or what we can do to change the trajectory of children that are entering the juvenile justice system. We have to do something different about that. And really, it's us that will do that. We are the preventioners that will keep that from happening. We are, even though it may not seem as if we have that much power, we are the people. Because oftentimes are the ones that see children, young children, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, that are having trouble, that are in trouble. One of the things that the profession has not really focused on is that mental health includes mental, emotional, and behavioral health problems. It includes all of those areas. We have historically only concentrated on mental health issues, but it actually includes all of those things. And we need to be aware of that and also advocate for those children that are struggling with those particular issues. But I need to make this real brief, but I do want to thank those of you who participated in my studies in 1987. Psych Gregory is here. He read through my book and sent me back comments a number of years ago saying that I should change this and that. And Dr. Jones, Janine Jones, I wrote a proposal and I sent it to her, and she was kind enough to send me a written note saying, Charles, you need to include these people in your book, because it's essential that this information that they have produced is included in this information. So I thank you so much, Dr. Jones, and she has definitely stuck with me throughout the production of this particular publication.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Dr. Williams.
First of all, thank you. I feel like I'm glad that awesome. And while Sherrie was speaking, I was just like, I hear you. I remember when there was like 20 of us, and the minority scholarship reception was really important. Was the thing to go to. What advice would you give to us? Because Sherrie, you looked out and you said, our future is bright. So Sherrie, Antoinette, or Janine, what advice would you give to us to thrive in spaces that would like us to survive? So what can we do to thrive in these spaces?
If you are here and you're the only one in your program, make sure you network and connect so that when you go back to those spaces, like he said, there's somebody you can call. And I will say that group chats, those things, hey, I'm feeling down today, you can get affirmations. But I think the support that you're not by yourself. So if you are in a program and you're the only one, connect with other people that are here, get their email, get their phone numbers, and just really make a plan to meet at this event next year, NASP next year, do something together. But I think having that support is really important.
I'd say in addition to having the support, don't be apologetic about trying to take care of our kids, because if it's not us, who will do it, you know? So kind of keeping the perspective that, okay, does anybody did you watch Scandal? No? Okay, you know how she talks about we're going to people that wear the white hats?
Yeah.
Keep your hat on.
Yeah.
And realize that if we stay on our mission, we will protect those little bodies that will become us as adults, and then just keep people around you that share the same mission, because as long as you do that, then you'll be able to continue and thrive, even in spite of all kinds of barriers.
I guess I would just say, and I think earlier this was alluded to, just find what is meaningful to you in this work and do that work. And when I started, I was doing work about Black people in school psych, like unapologetically. And I was doing qualitative researcher as a school psychologist, all things that were not very welcome in our field at the time. And I took my tenure track position, and I told my husband, I said, well, I'm gonna give it a go, but this might not work out, just so you know. Like I might, have to go back to being a practitioner, because this might not work out, but I'm gonna do what I know in my heart I wanna do for this field. And so I think whether you're a practitioner, working with children, whether it's our children or a specific population of children you're interested in supporting, or a specific community, or if you're a researcher, you have to do what's meaningful to you. Because if you don't do the meaningful work to you, all of the other things that tug at you as a school psychologist are gonna make you think, this isn't worth it, So you have to have something to come back to that centers you and lets you know, despite all the noise, this is why I'm doing this work. And so for me, it's always been centering the work that is most meaningful to me, and not letting anyone tell me, regardless of whether it was going against the tide of what school psychology was validating at the time. This is the work that is my heart work, and I'm gonna keep doing it regardless. And so I think that is important, regardless of whether you're a practitioner, a student, or an academic, in terms of that staying power in our field that we all need.
Greg, we have time for one, maybe two more questions. Got one right here.
Yeah, earlier you mentioned Charles Barrett's great presentation about your gifts. I was curious, what are your gifts?
That's a phenomenal question.
I actually think one of my gifts is building relationships, and the story that I would give is that we had a new dean, and I said I would take him around to some schools, and every time I went into the school, everybody talked about being in my class and, hey, how you doing? And we went to about 3 schools, and when we left, he said, so tell me this, did the university pay you to get to know these people, or did you do it on your own? And I said I did it on my own. And that goes back to the outreach that was really important for me. So I think one of my gifts is that I am able to build relationships.
Imagine that. Leaders that love people. Imagine that.
Thank you. During my temporary leave from university, I actually was in private practice at the same time, and I feel like my superpower has always been that I can connect with the hardest to connect with kids and bring them to the ability to speak for themselves and to articulate things that they have kind of pressed down. And now I've been able to, now that I'm not in private practice anymore, I've been able to translate that into teaching students on how to find that gift within themselves. So it's a pretty cool superpower, I think.
one of my gifts actually is my family. I think growing up with a family that was very centered in the civil rights movement in this country and fighting for the rights of Black people gave me a perspective that I've brought into my work and a desire to do work for our people. And so I think actually just growing up with people who told me, like, you have a responsibility to get educated. But with that education comes a responsibility to Black people and to fighting for our rights. And so I would say my grandparents, the lessons that they taught me has been one of the greatest gifts that I've been given in life, because when I entered school psych, I didn't see the fight that we have as Black people in school psychology as disconnected from the fight that we have as Black people in this country. And so it has shaped the questions that I ask as a researcher. It has shaped my desire to make a difference for Black people in this field. And so whenever I think about my gifts, I don't necessarily think that there's something internal to myself, but I think there's something that my family gave me. So I would say my family is my greatest gift, and the framing that they gave me to understand myself as a Black person and the issues and the struggles that we have as Black people in this country.
Phenomenal, phenomenal, phenomenal. I told my therapist that I love helping people. My therapist said that might be codependency. Could we stand to our feet and just give a round of applause for these amazing legends in the field? You can do better.